Christina Lynn. My business is Lynn Financial, and I love to talk about money because financial savviness is a skill that you can master. What I want to talk to you today about are house shopping tips. I like to come at all these real world things from a financial point of view because it's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of buying a house and kind of forget about the more serious things that you'll have to deal with afterwards, which is your budget and your financial plan. So we're going to do a little prep work ahead of time. If this is the first time that you are purchasing a house, what you want to do is start with getting pre-qualified. I actually encourage people to get 3 different quotes from different banks because this is going to do a couple of things for you. You're going to kind of get a feel for who you want to work with personality-wise, but even more important is the numbers. They're most likely going to be offering you different rates at different banks. And that may seem inconsequential right now because they're not going to be much different, but over the course of the life of the loan, it really adds up. So go the extra mile and get 3 different quotes and then compare them. You want to look at the interest rates and then also any fees associated with that, because the different banks or mortgage companies, they will structure the loan differently. So some of them may have a lower rate but have higher fees built in, and then the other one will do it the opposite. So you really need to read the fine print here and crunch the numbers. If you are not very good at reading through that, find someone who is good at that and ask them to help you, because it makes a difference. Now you probably have a friend or family member already that's a mortgage officer, and while that it's good to get a quote from them, they may not be the one that you ultimately end up going with because you can get a better rate with somebody else. And I encourage you to be brave enough to make that decision and be honest with that person. I tell people, just look at it like a business decision. This isn't anything personal. It's simply a matter of numbers, and this is a long-term financial decision for you, so you need to make the best one that makes sense for your budget. Okay, now to my tips. My first tip is to stick to the lower end of what you qualify for. This is going to be a difficult one because the mortgage officer is going to give you a range of what you qualify for, and that range is pretty big. And it's so tempting to go to the very far end of what you were qualified for and push the envelope, just get as much house as you can get for that number. Well, from a financial planning perspective, that may not be the best idea for your situation. Everyone has a different budget they're working with, but what happens is that there are a lot of unexpected costs that are going to pop up when you get this house. You're going to have to buy new garbage cans for every room, the shower curtain rods, and you're going to have to mend a fence. You're going to have to fix the landscaping. You may have to lay sod. There's just so many unexpected costs that are going to pop up when you get into that house that you weren't expecting. And it's going to be really difficult to make all of that happen if you have pushed your budget so far to the extreme that you really don't have any wiggle room for unexpected expenses. And the other nice thing about going towards the lower end of your budget is that means that there's a little bit more flexibility in your budget to do other things. I have a realtor friend who he calls it don't be house poor, which means like don't spend so much money on your house and have a really nice house, but you can't afford anything else. Like you can't afford to go out to eat or go on vacation, and you kind of feel like you're a slave to just your house payments. This will be really important when that new house excitement kind of wears off and reality sets in. You don't want your budget to be so tight that it stresses you out. My money tip number 2 for house shoppers is to study the amortization schedule. This is going to be a chart that's included in your closing paperwork, so you do actually have to see that, but it ends up being one of those things that you just kind of like sign and don't really pay much attention to. Well, I want you to study this amortization schedule before the day of closing, because upon studying it, this may sway you in one direction or another. It may change your mind on how long you plan to stay in the house. Some people think, oh, I'll just stay in this house for maybe like 2 or 3 years and then I'll upgrade when things change. Well, after studying the amortization schedule, that you may change your mind about the length of time you plan to stay in this house. It may also change your decision about how much you want to put as a down payment. Probably the most important piece of it is it may affect what kind of mortgage you get, whether it be a 15, a 20, or a 30-year mortgage. And lastly, it may change your decision on which house you choose. If you're deciding between two houses, it may kind of push you in one direction or another. So study that amortization schedule. And money tip number 3, speaking of down payments, I encourage you to aim for a 20% down payment. This is sort of like old school advice, but I like it for a couple of reasons. One, it gets rid of the requirement to pay private mortgage insurance. That's an acronym that they call PMI, and it's very common. If you don't have a 20% down payment, likely you'll have to be paying this. And it adds up. On my mortgage, I paid over $100 a month just for PMI. It's so frustrating to think about money being spent on private mortgage insurance when you are, pinching pennies elsewhere. It's easy to think, oh, if only I had that extra $100 cushion in my budget, life would be a lot better. And the second reason I really like the 20% down payment is it just minimizes your monthly payment. The larger the down payment, the smaller that your mortgage payment is. Kind of common sense, or it's so basic, but down the road, it really is going to make a difference in your lifestyle if you're not feeling like such a slave to your house payments. And my last money tip for you is location, location, location. It's tempting to want to go outside of the city to get a bigger bang for your buck. And it kind of depends on what your reason is for this. If you're looking just to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city, I totally understand that. I grew up in the country, so I really value that tranquility of being away from town. But if you're simply going just to get a better price, weigh the pros and cons of that before you make your final decision, because some things to think about are the amount of time that you're going to be spending commuting. That's time away from your family, and it also is added stress on your life. I used to commute for an hour, and it wasn't even that far away. The traffic was just terrible, but it really reduces your quality of life when you are commuting for a long time each day. And then the last thing to consider is driving conditions. I live in the north, and winter is something you really need to plan around here for. I don't do the best job, but I also live centrally located on purpose because I don't want to deal with weather conditions in the winter. So, and when you're living far out of town, just add that into, your decision-making tree of, well, there's going to be some days in the winter where I may not be able to arrive at work at all or late. How important is that to you? There's no right or wrong answer to this, but I care about your financial security and your financial future, so I wanted to share these tips with you. I hope you learned something. I hope they were helpful. Keep your chin up because you are an overcomer.